Wow. So, hi everybody. It's such a pleasure actually to be here today in this amazing frame in Istanbul in this amazing and very acknowledged worldwide event, which is this Stratcom 2023. And honestly, it's such an honor to chair this panel with such distinguished guests. That they are more than experts because they have huge experience in field work in several different and difficult zones, such as war and conflict. As we said, today we are going to deal in this panel with the truth. And it was rightly pointed out by the President, Fahrettin Altun, and some other keynote speakers that we are living in a time of crisis of truth. Why? We are pretty much exposed to misinformation, fake news, disinformation, manipulation as well. And also, we are receiving, since we are dealing in a very highly digitalized environment that to some extent is helping us to make our lives easy, but to some other extent is exposing us to fake news and misinformation, we feel responsible to select and choose the right source of information. And this is another reason why I do believe your presence here is an added value to this event and to the final discussion of this panel. I do consider you as the defender of truth and defender of human dignity along your work. So thank you very much. And I would like to briefly introduce you our guest, Mrs. Saadet Horuç. She has been working as a journalist for a long time in Belgium and in France and in Europe in general. And she has been a senior advisor to President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Besides, she has been also guest lecturer to a university in Ankara teaching journalists, and she's a PhD candidate in France related to international relations and media. So, Mrs. Horuç, thank you very much and welcome. And then we have Vasilisa Stefanenko, who is a very young, very brave journalist. She has been an awarding Pulitzer journalist along her duty and efforts in covering and being correspondent from Ukraine and the Russian unfortunate war zone. So, Vasilisa, welcome and thank you so much. Then we have Jafar Hasnain. Today we switch our duties and responsibility. He's a very well-known figure in TRT world, and before he has worked for some other international media as well. He's a correspondent, as presenter. He has huge and important experience in some conflict zone, such as Nagorno-Karabakh, northern Syria, Russia, and Ukraine, among the others. And he's also pretty much engaged and very sensitive in reporting the truth along human crises and defending the human dignity. So to you as well, welcome. And finally, we have Rina Nejes, sorry for my pronunciation. She's a researcher engaged in northern Syria area. She speaks fluently Hebrew and Arabic. She engages in several research centers and also in several media. And she's pretty much active in reporting on the issues related to PYG and YPG, and also against the fake news and fake information coming from that area. So Rina, welcome to you too. I will start from Mrs. Saadet Horuç. And you have an important experience from a technical point of view as a journalist, but also as advisor to President Erdogan, who is pretty much vocal and outspoken by denouncing the problem, the issue of fake news, and by defending the human dignity of people. So I know that you have a very important presentations, but before giving the floor to you, we would like to understand how distortion and fake news and manipulative information play against a truth-based information. And I know that you will address in a very accurate way along your presentation, focusing on the most recent and unfortunate conflict between Israel and Palestine. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Fahrettin Altun, Director of the Communications of Presidency of Turkey, and his team for organizing that summit, which has become a very important brand in the strategic communication Stratcom. And of course, starting my words, I'd like to express my gratitude to the more than 64 Palestinian journalists who have been attacked by Israel in their precious work to defend the truth. And of course, Turkey's communications department, with its center of combating against disinformation, had provided an important source of information for combating against disinformation also. So I'd like to express my gratitude to Idris Kardaş, the head of the disinformation, combat against disinformation center of the communications also at that point. Now, we have been observing perhaps the most brutal massacre of our modern age committed by Israel. I'd like to make my presentation, I will concentrate on Gaza and Palestine, because the recent massacre of truth is being committed by Israel against Palestine. And in a synchronized manner, Israel is waging a war not only against Palestinians, but also against truth. And unfortunately, majority of the international media became a proxy. Perhaps it's a very unfortunate word for using against the international media, but they became a proxy in supporting the Israeli fake news and Israel's killing the truth by all of its organs. So, for example, if you are following an event, for example, the attack against El Shifa Hospital in Gaza. If you turn on Al Jazeera English, I can understand English and French, unfortunately not Arabic. Because of that, I cannot watch Al Jazeera Arabic. But if you watch Al Jazeera English, you will see what's going on there. But if you turn the TV to CNN International or France 24, France 24 in French, you will see another world, another galaxy. Israel is not only just in our modern age, they are just playing with the limits of our perception and playing with the senses of the modern age people in its fake news. And in a war, the terminology of the whole world's cultures, civilizations, and humanities seems insufficient, and words are not enough to define the ongoing situation. But unfortunately, the terminology used by the Western media just shows that they became the real proxies of the Israeli war machine. For example, I would like to show a BBC tweet, X. They are saying that Israelis are being killed, but Palestinians die. Just Palestinians as if they die in Gaza themselves because of an illness or something. So, for example, yesterday's hostage deal, if you follow the stories, news about hostage deal, you see every moment of the Israeli hostages being released, but when it comes to the Palestinians released from prisons, even their joys, their excitement, their meeting with their families, we didn't see in the Western media, Western media bulletins. For example, it is the same when it comes to the so-called fear of Jews in Europe. You can say a Le Monde headline. I can speak about the French media, French language media, and English language media. You can see many spaces being many spaces in Western media bulletins or newspapers which talk about the fear of security of Jewish people in Europe. But when it comes to the massacres, being killed, babies being left without oxygen and without incubators, there is no space for this. And when you start to talk about the suffering of the Palestinian people or the atrocity being committed by Israel against Palestinian people, you will be accused of anti-Semitism, which in fact a reference to the hate crime. Here I would like to ask to the Western media or Israel, in order not to be accused of hate crime, do we have to applaud your war crimes? Do we have to stay silent in front of your daily basis of carpet bombing? Or we can ask this question, you made us by Netflix, by digital games, by computer age, very insensitive towards what's going on in another part of the world, and do we have to stay silent for this? So the only difference between the Holocaust after the World War II committed by Hitler fascism against Jews and today's massacre, atrocity, genocide committed by Israel against Palestinians is the only difference is the fact that we are watching on live. So many figures in the international press, I'm very sorry to tell this, but are competing with Goebbels, propaganda minister of Hitler, in their support to the genocide committed by Israel against Palestinians. What is the difference between the events which took place during the World War II and today's events in Gaza, in Palestine? For example, the terminology, the Israeli war against Hamas terrorists. No, Hamas is a party elected by Palestinians in 2006-07. The Palestinian people in Gaza, they decided that Hamas will govern them in Gaza. So if you just purchase, in quotation mark, terrorists in Gaza, what are you doing in West Bank? Why are you just doing raids, killing of too many people in West Bank? So the international media had failed to defend the truth during the recent massacres committed by Israel in Gaza, and fortunately we have Anadolu Ajansı, TRT, and all of the majority, I can say totality of the Turkish press, which defended the truth in Gaza. So Turkish press, Turkish communications department, and Turkey's feeling of conscience and sensitivity of the Palestinian people deserve an applauding of this audience, I think. I feel very honored to be part of such a nation, and also I feel very proud of a part of such an excellent team of the Turkish presidency, and to be a part of his advisor.
Вы хохотали, да?
Мамочка!
Не знаешь, куда бежать.
Чего расстраиваешься?
Не хочу, чтобы я умирала.
Репортажи ваши разошлись. Конечно, огромное дело сделать.
Они столько пережили с мамами.
If the world saw everything that happened in Mariupol, it would give at least some meaning to this horror. My brain will desperately want to forget all this, but the camera will not let it happen.
Thank you so much. This is really...
And I'm here just to tell you some stories. My life totally changed with the war started, because before a full-scale invasion, I was just a local reporter in a small TV channel in Kharkiv region. It's in the eastern Ukraine. And then war just came to my home, and as a journalist, I had no way. I did my decision just to continue working, covering this, to show the world the truth about what's going on in Ukraine. And this is how my life is looking right now. This is how I looked like before war started. I was just a local reporter. And this is how I'm working now every day in Ukraine, wearing the vest and helmet. And this is how all Ukrainian journalists now looking like in Ukraine, because it's really dangerous. I want to tell the story about this woman. This is 30-year-old Irina, who was killed by Russian attack in maternity hospital in Mariupol. She was pregnant for the first time and she had her first baby. And then she was injured, but she's still alive. And doctors told us that before she died, she said, like, I don't want to live because I know that my child died. Then Irina's husband tried to find her in the hospitals. He tried to find her everywhere in Mariupol. It was really hard because the city was under bombing all the time. But then he found her in the morgue. This is the photo of my colleague Evgeny Maloletka that we were together in Mariupol as a team. This photo I did months ago in my hometown Kharkiv. This is a small boy, he's 10 years old. He just slept in his apartment, and then a rocket just hit his house. And he didn't wake up. And I also thought that I will not wake up when I heard these explosions. And this is reality in Ukraine every day, and we as a journalists trying to show the truth to the whole world by doing this. Even it's hard, if it's painful to watch and do, we are trying to do everything we can. Yeah, this is my hometown, Kharkiv. And this is what we are looking and going through every day. The mass graves in Izium, where more than 400 people were buried under Russian occupation. And also my friends were in these mass graves also. This is, you can see the small bracelet with Ukrainian flag on the hand of person who was buried in this mass grave. This is the city of Avdiivka that is under shelling every day. On that day, I remember we came with the police to evacuate children from this place. Kherson flooded, like after Kakhovka Dam collapsed, and we evacuated animals with the volunteers under shelling. This is attack on the Ukrainian electricity station and infrastructure, like it was this morning. That's why today, this morning, thousands of Ukrainian in the Kyiv region houses are without electricity. And we are really worried that we will have hard winter one more time this year. This is how people without electricity feeding their children in the occupied areas. This photo I made in Kharkiv region, just feeding people, their children like this. The woman who lost her house in the Kherson flooded, 90-year-old woman who just cried and didn't know what to do. This is we are, as a journalist, going through every day. And I'm here today just to show you and to remind one more time about what's going on. And we are just going to these places to take the facts and to show it to the whole world, to document these scenes, because I think it's a question of humanity and we need to be gathering together to fight with this. It's not normal that people are dying every day, the children dying every day. And we are trying to do everything and to show the world the truth with these images, with all work we are doing on the field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really thank you for your effort. We all felt, and we are all feeling your emotions in addressing these, and also by looking at this catastrophe, I would say, and these very painful images. And also I would like to add something. I mean, Vasilisa is quite young for coping with such an event and in doing such a job, but she's doing for the sake of the truth and also for the love of your country. So thank you so much. And now I will give the floor to Jafar. Jafar Aznain, I've seen that you were following what Vasilisa was saying, you agreed, but you were also showed some disappointment, right, when she showed some pictures. And you have been very, very active and pretty much engaged in defending the truth and pretty much committed in highlight humanitarian stories and defending humanitarian rights. So my question to you is, how is important in your work the ethics, an ethical approach, and its conformity in humanitarian crisis? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Valeria. I think ethics are of paramount importance. They form the basis of journalism. And I think it's important to highlight here what these ethics are. You know, when I was starting my career in journalism, my seniors told me that there are basically 5 principles in journalism. Number 1 is accuracy. I'm not going to say truth because what's the truth for me might be something else for you, but being accurate is the key. So everything that a journalist does has to be based on facts. So that's the key. That's A. Number 2, impartiality. You know, there are always 2 sides to the stories. In fact, in some cases, more than 2 sides to one single story. So it's a journalist's responsibility to make sure that he gives enough chance to all sides of a single story, and that's how a journalist becomes impartial. Then the third one would be independence. Of course, when a journalist files his or her work, he has to own it. It doesn't have to be on the behalf of any government, any lobby group, or any interest group. Because the moment that happens, his or her journalism becomes biased. The fourth one would be humanity. Of course, when we are out on the field, we have to be very careful about the things that we say, the kind of language that we engage in, the kind of pictures that we play. If the work that we do is endangering the lives of some people, especially civilians, then that is not appropriate. So being human is also key. And the fifth one would be accountability, and I believe this is the toughest one for journalists, primarily because this profession is not very humble from my personal experience, and journalists have a tough time acknowledging their mistakes and owning if they have done something wrong. So these are the key principles that I feel are very important when it comes to ethics in journalism. And before I continue, you know, since we're talking about journalism in our age right now, I just outlined to you what these ethics are, and they're basically part of more than 400 codes of conduct in journalism, but these are the 5 key ones. Based on this, let me pose a question to the audience. Based on these ethics, how many of you here think that journalists in our age are following these ethics? You can raise your hands.
There is the gentleman there.
Okay, so I think I personally saw 3 to 4 hands. So the majority of the public who's present here right now strongly believes that journalists are not following these ethics. What does that shows us? And I think as journalists, and I'll be blunt with saying this, I think it's a matter of shame for journalism in this age, because the public has lost confidence in journalism.
Exactly.
And the best example of what's happening with this industry can be found with what's happening between Israel and Hamas right now. I've been following the conflict from the very beginning. I've been reading newspapers from different countries, and I have to say that it disgusts me. It's absolutely disgusting the way Western media has covered the conflict between Israel and Hamas. For example, the Daily Mail, in fact, it is the most widely circulated newspaper in the United Kingdom. It took the Daily Mail 14 days after the 7th of October to write the accumulated total death toll of Palestinians on their first page, while they were writing the death toll of Israelis from the 7th of October. And the kind of language which the chief advisor to the president of Turkey highlighted in her presentation as well is absolutely appalling. When they refer to Palestinians, they call them barbaric, but when they refer to Israelis, it's always precision strikes, collateral damage, and when it comes to the Palestinians, it's barbaric and atrocities. So it just goes to show the double standards within Western media when it comes to covering the Palestinian conflict. And I think it does not stop here. It goes on with broadcast media as well. I have seen so many interviews of Western journalists interviewing Palestinians and experts on this topic. And the first question that they ask is, do you condemn what happened on the 7th of October? So most of these journalists are trying to test the humanity of the person they're interviewing. And if the person does not condemn, for them, he or she automatically becomes a terrorist sympathizer or someone who supports terrorism, someone who supports the killing of civilians. That's absolutely appalling, absolutely unacceptable. And what this is doing to the perspective of the audience is shaping the Palestinians in a way that is not based on any of the ethics principles that I just outlined. Because when you are not giving the accurate picture of what's happening between Israel and Hamas, you are basically in violation of all these ethics. Accuracy is not there. Impartiality is not there. They're constantly giving one side of the story. They're constantly talking about what happened on the 7th of October. Nobody talks about the context. It did not start on the 7th of October. I have to say this. It did not start on the 7th of October. There's a history to it, decades-old history. But we barely see anyone in Western media talk about that. We barely see anyone in Western media talk about the Israeli raids on Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is illegal under international law. We barely see anyone talk about the raids in the occupied West Bank, which is, again, illegal under international law. We barely see anyone in Western media talk about the fact that Israel has been called an apartheid state, not by any other country, but by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. They have conducted independent investigations on that matter. And they have come up with a conclusion that it is an apartheid. What Israel is doing to the Palestinians is an apartheid. But show me how many Western media outlets talked about this in their coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I have to say, none. I personally have not come across a single outlet highlighting these factors when they talk about the coverage of Israel and Palestine. And I think it does not stop here. The bias and the violation of the ethics that I outlined is prevalent in other conflicts as well, because I have personally covered Azerbaijan and Armenia conflict. In fact, I have my friends from the United States sometimes ask me, Jafar, why is Azerbaijan attacking Armenia? What's going on there? I'm like, Azerbaijan is not attacking Armenia. Read international law. Read United Nations resolutions. In fact, my friend in the US, and I don't blame him for that, because that's the kind of coverage he saw over the past 3 decades. He did not even know that Karabakh under international law is an occupied territory by Armenia. He did not know that. He had no idea that Karabakh is an occupied territory by Armenia for 3 decades. There are multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions calling for Armenian troops to withdraw from Karabakh. Every country on this entire in this world recognizes Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. And again, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, they have filed reports basically highlighting the war crimes that Armenia has committed against the Azerbaijani civilians. But again, when the Karabakh war erupted, the last one, 2020, you know what? I was surprised with the way the whole coverage was going. Journalists, especially in the western part of the world, were completely ignoring international law, United Nations Security Council resolutions. And In fact, they had portrayed this picture that as if Karabakh is part of Armenia under international law, because that's how the reporting was throughout the conflict. In fact, I remember, I think it was October 11th or 12th, I might be wrong with the date, there was an Armenian missile attack on the Azerbaijani city of Ganja, which is basically in mainland Azerbaijan. It's not part of Karabakh, so it's not in the conflict zone. In that missile strike, at least 12 civilians were killed, including 2 children. It was late at night, around 1 a.m. In the morning. I was called to work. My coordinator at the time called me and said, okay, we are going to go live on air for rolling coverage. So first thing what I did was open up international televisions. And guess what? Nothing. And this is what I asked myself at the time. If such an incident had happened in a Western country, I bet you these international networks would go on rolling coverage, not for 1 day, but for at least 2 weeks.
Right.
But nothing was there. So this is another bias that I think is quite prevalent in international media. And apart from that, I think when it comes to Syria, we have seen examples of how reporting from mainstream Western media has been unethical. For example, to look at the PKK terrorist organization. I've been to Syria, I've covered the conflict from Idlib. I've spoken to families who were victims of PKK terrorist attacks. But when you look at Western media, they portray them as some sort of freedom fighters, even though it's not just Turkey which recognizes the PKK as a terrorist organization, but the European Union and the United States as well. Defense Secretary Carter, back in 2016, confirmed the link between the PKK and the YPG, which are present in northern Syria. Perhaps my colleague can expand on that when she speaks, but it's absolutely appalling the way Western media covers the PKK terrorists, showing them as some sort of freedom fighters. And I honestly do not blame the Western audience for having such a perception about these terror elements, the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and Israel and Gaza. It's mainly the mainstream Western media and their bosses. Because the audience is just sitting on their sofa changing television and they'll watch whatever you show them. The problem is they're not being watched the accurate picture. They're not being showed impartial coverage of these events. And this is primarily why there are a lot of misconceptions in the Western world about what's going on in Israel and Palestine, Gaza, Azerbaijan, Armenia, for example, and especially in northern Syria as well. So, as I finish, I would just like to say that it's important for us to understand that international media does not mean Western media. It means they have to take perspective from every corner of the world, because those colonial times are now gone. The West has no longer a moral superiority over people from the other side of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me thank you for your amazing job, and also to TRT World for offering such an accurate and ethical special coverage along those crises. Lastly, the Israel and Palestine coverage, which is one of the main truth-based reportage that we get and information that we get all over. Thank you so much, Jafar. And you mentioned about Syria, and you mentioned about PKK, YPG, and PYD. And actually now we have one of the most experienced experts in the field, who is Rena, that she has been there active since 2015, if not longer, and she is fighting against misinformation and misperception related to YPG and PYD. So I know that you have a presentation showing how the truth can emerge and can prevail. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Merhaba. Önce bence çok ilginç bir konferans şimdi var. I'm enjoying it a lot. Thanks for the organizers. I want to say that at first. And I like to say one remark. I know my language, I'm from the Netherlands, Dutch, which also half of Belgium speaks, is not accessible very much. But Belgian and Dutch media, the Dutch language TV, does actually do a very good job on Palestine. I know it's not accessible for if you don't know the language, but at least I want to point one mark of hope. Now, the Belgian politicians as well, and the Dutch politicians not so much, but at least media is doing, on Palestine at least, I'm not saying everything, but a very good job to give some point of hope maybe. I want to point out fieldwork and language. I was a journalist in the past. I left Dutch journalism because of some hoax that were awarded that the Free Syrian Army are jihadists. If that were true, I would have been killed many times already. That was not the case. And then I'll first would like to take you to Syria. Very shortly, Syria is divided in 4 parts. When we say the red part is regime, the yellow part is YPG, but also regime pockets there, and increasingly more regime soldiers, especially in the north. They work together. If you want to read more about that, there's a Klingendahl report, 82 pages on my pinned tweet. And then in the north, you have green areas, the very north, SNA areas, SNA Syrian National Army, which is which was the Free Syrian Army backed by Turkey. And then you have, of course, Idlib, where there is a different system, very conservative Islamist. I mean, like I was one day in Idlib, I have to wear a scarf, but in SNA areas, I don't have to wear a scarf. As an example, I came in the first time with a scarf, and the first thing what I heard in Azaz, take it off, you don't need it here, So that's to give a picture for everyone who is not going into Syria in the public. Oops. Then I would like to start with Afrin. That's, of course, a very sensitive topic. I found out, especially through my fieldwork, there is a mismatch, as what you pointed out very well, with Western media and what I find on the ground. The situation is not as black and white. PYD, and especially in Afrin, they were working very much together with the Russians and with the Assad regime. They helped Assad to take over Aleppo again, for example. They also they expelled the whole Arab population from areas in the north, and that actually triggered, with some more points, triggered that the Arabs asked Turkey to get rid of the PYD in Afrin. Now, my analysis is not as important at all as what the Kurds themselves say. Let's listen to the video. How can we make the video work? Where are the technical...
مرحبا، في أفرين مدينة في مقطع رابطة المسافرين السوريين، ومعنا لقاء مع المدير هون حسن حسنان. في الغرب أولا في الغرب الصورة موجودة كل الأطراف حلوة يعني طريقة، بس أنتم موجودين. كنت عايزة أسمع من حضرتك ليه أنتم موجودين وشو أنتم بتعملوا؟ وأولا طبعا ممكن
أنا أزاد عثمان، أنا ابن أفرين، أنا ابن مدينة أفرين، لأن كنت عايش بمناطق متعددة لأنه كانت حزب موجودة، ولكن بعد خروج الحزب من أفرين أنا جيت مباشرة على أفرين وفتحنا مكتب. نحن فتحنا مكتب مباشرة بأفرين. نحن كان لنا هدفنا أولا تثبيت أهالي أفرين بالمدينة عشان ما يخرجوا. يعني كان هدفنا الأول المرحلة الأولى كان إنه أهالي أفرين يبقوا في مدينة أفرين، هي المرحلة الأولى. بعدين انتقلنا للمرحلة الثانية إنه أهالي أفرين موجودين في الخارج ورجعوا. عملنا على إعادة أهالي أفرين إلى منطقة أفرين. حقيقة أول 6 أشهر أنجزنا أشياء عظيمة. يعني أكثر من 120,000 من أخوتنا الأكراد رجعوا. كانت قوافل كثير كبيرة. قافلة 100 سيارة 200 سيارة. يعني أول 6 أشهر بعد التحرير بعدة يعني ب3 أشهر فعلا استطعنا إعادة عدد كبير. بعدين انتقلنا على مرحلة أخرى وهي الدفاع عن الأهالي في استرداد ممتلكاتهم. لانه طبعا لما الناس تخرج من بلدها يعني الممتلكات لما بتبقى فاضيه في مين بيجي ممكن يستخدم. فنحن حاولنا نسترد الممتلكات واعاده الاهليه. واعتقد نحن حققنا شيء ليس كبير جدا ولكن نحن راضين يعني انه بحد الادنى استطعنا اعاده الحقوق الى اصحابها واعادتها هي فري الى منطقه الفري. ومن حوالي سنه وشوي كمان في
I see I don't have time for all the videos that I have, and this is only a tiny collection. The next part would be from Central Afrin, how the PKK put explosives in homes and lands of Kurds, Syrian Kurds, that did not want to leave Afrin with them, because Kurds there talk about, was very much a surprise for me. Many Kurds there talk about the liberation of Afrin. It's only a small part which is with YPG, and that is very much not clear in Western media, I think, when they talk about Syrian Kurds. I skip that. I go to northeast Syria. How can I? It's not work. Yeah, that one. Northeast Syria. I was there in February for the first time in Ras Al Ain, Tel Abyad. I mean, I was in Ras Al Ain 4 years ago when YPG was still there. But now the Free Syrian Army, SNA, is there. And the arrows that you see is the migration flows from Deir Zor, Raqqa, to Ras Al Ain transit point, to Turkey, to Germany and the Netherlands especially. I was alarmed by Kurds first, more than a year ago, that there is an exodus going on from the Kurdish areas, and also Arabs I found out when I was there, from the Arab areas who are leaving, especially young people, they are fleeing forced conscription by SDF, minors. There was a Kurdish girl, 12-year-old. There were Kurdish and Arab guys, 14 years, 15-year-old, on their own or sent by their family to Europe. And we're talking about thousands per week. Maybe I can show a picture, but don't have time to show maybe this video. Okay, I'll do a small, can the video be put on? Here I interview some guys that I found in Ras Al Ain.
مرحبا.
أهلا.
أنت من وين؟
من دير الزور.
من دير الزور. وأنت وصلت على هون إمتى بالضبط؟
من أسبوع.
من أسبوع. وليه أنت تركت دير الزور؟
أنا تركت دير الزور من الخدمة الإلزامية والتجنيد الإجباري وضغط النفسية، ما بيسمحوا لك بتعملي أي شيء أو بتكوني معهم أو ما بتعيشي.
أنت لازم تشتغل معاهم.
إيه.
معاهم أنت
معهم.
أنت بتقصد قصد.
قصد. إيه.
وأنت من وين في دير الزور؟
من شرق دير الزور.
من شرق دير الزور. كم عمرك؟
1999 مواليدي.
وأنت دفعت كم يعني؟
دفعت $50 لوصلت لهون.
من دير الزور على هون $50. شكرا كثير.
شكرا.
ممكن أسألك كمان؟
تفضل.
مرحبا.
أهلا.
من وين أنت؟
من دير الزور.
من دير الزور كمان. من الشرق ولا؟
لا، شرق.
من الشرق. وإمتى أنت وصلت لهون؟
من أسبوع.
من أسبوع. مش مع بعض، مش مع بعض.
لا، مع بعض.
أنتوا مع بعض. وليه أنت تركت دير الزور؟
تجنيد إجباري.
تجنيد إجباري.
وخلونك تتجند معهم، يقاتل معهم ضد إخواننا والدعم وكل ما تقدر تعيش إلا تحتهم.
يعني أنت كنت لازم تحارب يعني ضد العرب، ضد سكان المنطقة. يعني أنت شو عمرك؟
مواليد 2004.
وأنت دفعت نفس المبلغ يعني $50 كمان؟
$50.
وكيف كان الحل هون؟ يعني كان في تفتيش أو كيف المعاملة هون يعني مثلا؟
هون المعاملة حلوة.
كويس؟
كويس.
في مكان أنت تنام فيه ويعني مثلا؟
في.
الحمد لله. مين تاني؟ مرحبا. من وين أنت؟
من الحسكة.
من جنوب حسكة.
So I did many of interviews. I went 3 times now, and it's still going on. Let me give some short final remark. Many miners, they go to Germany and to the Netherlands. That was surprising for me. When I interviewed these guys in February, like 60% said, and also girls. I was not allowed to film everywhere, so here and there, and not the girls. 60% said, about 60% said we were on the way to Germany, and 40% to the Netherlands, and the police chief there, they tried to stop them, but it's overwhelming, they're overwhelming numbers. He said also people are on the way to Austria. He said like Germany, the Netherlands, and Austria, and we came across one who was on the way to the USA, and one told us to Luxembourg. I went 3 times now this year to, we filmed for Belgian TV. It's not yet aired. My final remark is, in the Netherlands, I heard about Geert Wilders. We are really in shock that he is the biggest party now. In the Netherlands, the government fell in July because of the arrival of minors. And the government did not disclose where these minors come from. Now, 40% of the asylum seekers the last few years in the Netherlands are from Syria. And I was last month in the Netherlands just very shortly, but I went to the place where these minors are kept. It's actually in my town in the east of Holland, in Zwolle. I was not allowed, that's what I thought, I will not be allowed to speak with those, so I thought, you know, I saw some guys sitting on the bench, the English word thing, outside, so I thought, let me already ask them where they're from, and they were all from Syria, and one from regime and the other from SDF area, so I had no chance to ask to go interview inside that hotel where the miners come from, but outside they were from Syria. In short, I believe that US policy in northeast Syria, by closing the eyes for this forced conscription of minors and of elderly young people, fuels migrant flows to Europe, to Germany, and to my country, with effect in my country, because the whole election campaign was about migration.
Thank you so much, Rina. Thank you, really. I mean, this enlightens once again how there is misperception in the West and in the general public opinion towards some specific issues, and as well some fake news sometimes they are coming up out of there. We have almost 5 minutes left, but I would like to ask briefly to all of you, how do you think this information prevails in the mainstream media? Basically, you have already addressed this question, but if in few words, could you reply to this? We will really appreciate it. Thank you. Mrs. Oruç?
I'll speak very shortly. The recent example of that 40 Israeli propaganda, 40 beheaded babies in the first days of the Israel's war in Gaza, and even Joe Biden, US President Joe Biden, made a reference that babies he made a statement basing on fake news fabricated by Israel. And when we just compare the babies who were left without incubators in Al-Shifa hospital, there were the images, but the fake news just fabricated by Israel and even voiced by US President, despite the corrections of the White House. So that recent period during that war committed by Israel is the worst period, worst example perhaps, for disinformation, manipulation, and the destruction of truth. But thanks God, there are defenders of truth who I would like to praise again journalists in Gaza, Turkish press, communications department, and Turkish President Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan for defending the truth. I just finished my
Thank you.
notes. Thank you.
Thank you. Vasilisa.
Yeah, when I say on our example, like when we were in Mariupol and we covered the story of bombing of maternity hospital, Russian media wrote that there were actresses and everything is a fake and we are fake journalists, but it was true, it was reality, and now you can see me and I saw it by my eyes. So we really need to be careful with the searching of the first source, of searching of the journalist's work, and to provide this real information. And this is really, really important. And I think now we can see the work of journalists everywhere in their personal social media and following this. And like as I'm working for international agency, I can say that we have our correspondents everywhere, and we are focusing on the facts and trying to show it. And sometimes these images are showing more facts than even words. That's why it's so important to follow in this and be careful with fake information. Thank you.
Thank you. Jafar.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Very good question, Valeria, and I know we are a bit tight on time. So one key fact here, you know, back during the days of Vietnam War, it would take anywhere between 36 to 72 hours for a news piece to make it to a program. But now it can happen with a click of a button. While it has its advantages, I think it has a lot of disadvantages too. One of them being misinformation and disinformation, fake news. Now, instead of highlighting how I see disinformation, misinformation, and fake news on the internet, because we have spoken about it extensively in this panel, I can give some tips, some things that I do personally on a personal level to counter misinformation, disinformation, fake news on the internet. Always know your source. Are you taking your news from a personal blog or a reputable news organization? Because if it's from a blog, most likely it is going to have some sort of opinion in it. So try to take your news from reputable news organizations. B would be get some sort of media literacy. Know the platform that you're using. If you're using Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, know how it works. If you're using Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp, know the technicalities of these softwares, because that also helps a lot. Media literacy is very important. And the third one would be get yourself familiarized with some sort of fact-checking software. I'm not going to take any names here because I don't want to do free marketing for anyone, but there are many out there which are doing a phenomenal job. So yeah, these are the three things that I do on a personal level to counter misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. Thank you.
Thank you. Rina?
Valeria, the question was how to counter fake news, because I did not.
How prevalent is fake news and disinformation in the media?
I'd like to give one example. As I said, fieldwork and languages, I want to point out, I think it's very important when you report about an area that you at least know the language. You know, I find it always amazing how people come with reports and don't even can communicate with people or follow the local media. The IDF Spox, the Israeli army Spox, gave out some videos, and in the videos there were people talking from Gaza. But I could already hear, you know, in one sentence, the Arabic is not from Gaza. And you know, it was not one time, it was several times, and even in one video there was Hebrew shining through the Arabic. You know, Hebrew has this special pronunciations, and I was not the only one who was saying it, many others were saying it, you know. So I think I would now point out, I'm a linguist, of course, but that knowing your languages helps a lot by debunking news. Let me point out that one.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we need to close the session here, but I want really to thank all of you for the great effort in telling the truth, actually, and thank you to your courage and to your professionalism as well. And thank you to the Republic of Turkey to be one of the main key actors in raising the voice and defending the human beings and the oppressed, I will say. So thank you so much, and I will give you the floor to Andrea.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valeria.
What a fantastic
really, really a fantastic panel, and so interesting to have the perspectives of journalists that have been on the ground, especially in conflict zones. So thank you. Really fascinating. Thank you so much. And it's so true, by the way, Rena, it's so frustrating to sometimes see as a journalist, and we've all had this personal experience when we're on the ground reporting, we know our shortcomings when we go to a place and we actually cannot speak the local language. You're jetted in, and this is something you have to understand when you do read the work of journalists, is you have to know that they might not have any history at all in the area that they're covering. So their point of reference is only what they've read from other journalists covering a certain area. So their perspective can be very narrow because, again, they don't speak the local language, they might not know too much of the history, which is extremely important in a context, especially with the Israel-Gaza conflict that we're witnessing right now.
Okay.
Ali John.
We're going to take a short coffee break right now.
Absolutely. Only 10 minutes, 15 minutes max?
Let's try to make it 10. I've been told by the organizers that our next speaker, Anders, will actually be fully utilizing this massive video wall that we have here. It's quite exciting, I hear. So please hurry back. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thank you.